Federico, we are back with another episode, a WWDC episode, that is, of App Stories. And, of course, this episode, like the others, are brought to you by Raycast, a great Mac app. I wanted to talk to you today, Federico, I think about a few different things. We've been combing through the videos, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about shortcuts at the back today, and about maybe iPad keyboard navigation.
That's a good pick. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe throw in some developer tools in there too. Stuff that's not too geeky, but interesting. Where do you want to start? Because what have you been concentrating on since the keynote?
So what I do every year is I go into the developer app and I bookmark the sessions that I'm interested in. I download them offline, and then when they come out, usually I would do this in person, like I would have a schedule and I would go to different rooms of the convention center to go to the session. Now I just need to bookmark the sessions and open the app. But then I just watch the video, put my note-taking app to the side. This year, it's Obsidian. We're going to talk about that eventually. And so I've been watching some sessions today. I want to talk about shortcuts for the Mac because I think it's an interesting story. It's a compelling story just on its own, like this product story for this, what used to be a third-party app. Now it's a major component of Apple's operating systems and also the future of automation. And I think it's also interesting for iOS and iPadOS users because of what Apple needed to do on the Mac. It brings some benefits to everybody. So it's got that ripple effect that I think it's interesting for all of us. So, I don't know, John, have you installed, first of all, is it Monterey or Monterey? Monterey, okay.
Yep.
So, have you installed it yet?
I have. It's on.
Oh, you have?
Yes, I've got it on an M1 iMac sitting on the table next to my main desk. So I haven't played with it still a lot, but I have gotten it all set up, and yeah, I've been digging in. It's kind of fun. It's going to be interesting. I haven't built any shortcuts yet. It's been too busy still, but I'm hoping to do that a little bit later today or tomorrow. It's, I think the story with shortcuts is very interesting from a meta level, as you said, because first of all, this app is being brought over to the Mac using Swift UI. So right there, I think, just from the way it's constructed, you've got this integration with what's going on the iPad and the iPhone as well. And it makes a lot of sense for an app that has its roots in the iPhone and the iPad, because this allows a common code base for the app when it's on different platforms. But it also is, I think, well aligned with kind of the direction Apple is heading in terms of what it's encouraging its third-party developers to do as well. And I guess the other prong of this meta story to me is the fact that it's very clear that shortcuts is intended to be the future of Mac automation. They said that right up front in session videos, but they were also very reassuring that they weren't getting rid of existing automations. But the things like, for instance, Automator is very much framed in the context of you can bring your favorite actions and workflows from Automator over to shortcuts. There's not a way to go the other direction, for instance. So this is very much the future, but it also supports a lot of existing tools like Automator, AppleScript, and shell scripting.
Yeah. So, and I want to talk about that. So, when it comes to Automator, so as you mentioned, there's going to be a built-in migrator to open your automated workflows in Shortcuts for Monterey. Super easy, and all of those actions, they will just be translated to the new Shortcuts file format, and you will see them in the Shortcuts editor on the Mac. But to make this possible, and this is the fascinating part for me, to make this possible, obviously, Apple had to go in, the Shortcuts team had to go in, and first of all, make a Mac app, which they never had.
They were not Mac developers,
they
right?
were not, and I saw a tweet from one of the members of the team saying, basically, we had to learn how to become Mac developers, which I thought that was great, right? Because these are, used to be like a small team, some young kids just making an iOS app, and now they need. they needed to learn all the UI conventions of macOS, right? And I believe it's not a standard. It's not a Catalyst app. I believe it's made with AppKit and SwiftUI.
I think that's right.
I think that SwiftUI code base ensures like a consistent behaviors with the like unified code base with iOS. So that's great.
Right.
But so besides making a Mac version, they had to recreate those automator actions in shortcuts. And we're talking about some actions that were not present in shortcuts before. Things like listing the contents of a folder, or revealing a document in the Finder, or creating a photo album, creating a calendar, all these kinds of things that were not available in shortcuts before, including some of the more exotic features of Automator, such as running AppleScript, running shell scripts, running the the JXA, the JavaScript for Mac Automation framework. So all the scripting actions that were not available in shortcuts previously, and now they are on the Mac. But in this process of taking, to make this transition possible and building these new actions in, I think it's fascinating that some of these new actions were also brought over to iOS and iPadOS 15. Right. And I actually tweeted about this today. So a subset of those actions that Apple recreated for Automator on the Mac are also available on iPhone and iPad. Creating calendars, creating photo albums, listing the contents of a folder, which I want to talk some more, I want to talk about this kind of stuff tomorrow, what it means for file management, getting the text or rich text from a PDF, making an image from a PDF, turning text into spoken audio, moving files, opening files in default apps, basically lots of file management, and also splitting PDF documents in multiple pages.
And also things like window management, because, that's the thing about this is that there's a whole paradigm here that didn't exist on iOS, things like Windows, for instance, but also much deeper integration, which, as you said, we'll talk about later, files, which is a big theme of this version of shortcuts.
Yeah, the integration with files, I think it's got a lot of potential when it comes to, folks like the things that I was doing before with Toolbox Pro, and all the hoops that I needed to, to deal with, basically, just to have some basic file-based automation going. All those are effectively gone. So there's a compelling story, I think, with what Apple has done with the Automator to Shortcuts migration tool, and I'm really keen to see because I do have some Automator workflows that I still got them on my Mac Mini from back in the day when I used to create Automator stuff. I still have those here, so I'm curious to see how they will work in practice. But this is not like there's more that Apple has done, and I think the fact that the Mac was the reason why they did it, but then because of the work they did on macOS, it also applies to the rest of us on iOS and iPadOS. I think that's what I find fascinating here. Sort of like you could say that the Mac was a catalyst for change. You could say that.
No, absolutely. And look, that's we've seen that in more places than
Stephen would be proud of me for this joke.
Yes, we've seen this in more places than one. I mean, I just got done reviewing not long ago Timery for Toggle by Joe Herbar, and that app, it really benefited on the Mac. I mean, it really benefited on the iPad from the Mac version that just came out because it brought over a new UI that was modern. It also brought over a lot more shortcuts and other things like that, and settings that are really helpful for navigating the app with a keyboard. And that's perfect for on the iPad as well. And I think that you're seeing a similar thing here with shortcuts, where the process of going through adapting this app so that it works well on the Mac is also benefiting the other versions of the app as well. The other Automator action I want to call out, Federico, that I don't think you mentioned was get the current URL from Safari, which I think...
Yeah, but that's not on iOS, unfortunately.
Oh, it's not? All right. See, I hadn't looked into that yet.
So when it comes to window management, that's because obviously on the Mac, automation on the Mac has the concept of the active window or the
Right.
frontmost window, or what's the current view of a window. And none of that appears to be available on iPadOS still. So on iPadOS, you can create new split views using shortcuts,
Right.
but you cannot do the more advanced stuff like filtering windows by name or what you just mentioned, getting the current URL from Safari, which
Got it.
I really hoped that was going to be the case. Like, I mean, you're doing the work for Automator on the Mac. You
Right.
can open Windows on iPad. You can have, like, Safari is effectively the same on iPad, but there's still some limitations, obviously.
Well,
And,
this is where you're going to have to use your shell scripting probably, Federico, where you're in Safari on the iPad and you run a shortcut that operates another shortcut on your Mac using shell scripting to do the same thing, right?
This is exactly like, this is the last thing I want to say before we move on. I do think there's a potential that I could see myself using the Mac slightly more because of this
Yes.
even more advanced automation that I can do. There's some
Right.
things that I cannot do quickly and reliably on iOS or iPadOS, such as encoding videos with command line tools like FFmpeg, for example. I could see myself doing something fancy with shortcuts here because
Yeah.
I can call out to shell scripts and Apple script in shortcuts for Mac. And all of those old automated workflows and keyboard maestro macros that I have can now become shortcuts, and I know how to use shortcuts. So I'm not saying like I'm gonna refer to this as pulling a mic. Like, I'm not gonna pull a mic and become a Mac user,
Right.
but I could see myself using the Mac slightly more for that kind of more command line based automation.
Yeah, I expect that you will, because this is something that I do already quite a bit. I mean, I did something for the club not too long ago where I used Downy because it has a command line interface, and I used a shortcut on my iOS devices to download videos from YouTube, and I would have the Mac take care of it. And it, something like that didn't even require shortcuts on the Mac because there was already a command line interface for Downy. But it's basically the same sort of operation to do that kind of thing, and I think that'll come in handy, and a lot of people will do some powerful things with that as well. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Raycast, our official WWDC sponsor. It's time for you to say goodbye to Spotlight and hello to Raycast. Raycast is a native Mac super tool that eclipses and extends Spotlight's functionality. With the press of a keyboard shortcut, Raycast launches apps and a whole lot more. You can do all sorts of things. You can search for and access your files, use third-party apps and services like Google Workspace, GitHub, Jira, Asana, Linear, and a whole lot more. You can check your schedule and join Zoom meetings with a single keystroke, or start, schedule, and join Zoom meetings too. Access the clipboard, set a reminder, take a quick note, control system functions on your Mac, and a whole lot more. And just yesterday, Raycast launched its WWDC extension in collaboration with our friend Guy Rambo, who makes the WWDC for macOS app for watching session videos. The extension lets you quickly find videos from this year's sessions and watch them in the app. Raycast also supports quick links that lets you open files, folders, and URLs. Quick links even accept input, allowing you to use them to execute search queries right from Raycast. I set one up for whenever I'm searching MacStories, for instance. The app has a snippets system now, too, eliminating repetitive typing. You can send canned emails, drop in frequently used code into your IDE, grab your company's brand colors, and a whole lot more. The app is extensible, too, with scripts. In fact, there are over 400 scripts that have been made by its active community of users. Scripts let you control other apps like Bear, CleanShot, Craft, and Things, for example. You can also control Apple Music and Spotify, or even set your Slack status. It's super cool. Because Raycast is native, it behaves exactly as you'd expect, and it's fast and responsive. It's also actively developed with a keen focus on privacy. Together, Raycast's features keep you focused on what's most important to you. You avoid inefficient context switching and eliminate clutter. Download Raycast for free right now at raycast.com and give it a try and level up your productivity. Again, that's raycast.com to download Raycast for free. Our thanks to Raycast for their support of the show.
All right, John, I want to mention one other session that I watched today, which was all about keyboard navigation in iPadOS 15. So this got a little technical toward the end, but I just want to talk about it.
It really did. I saw this one.
Yeah.
I saw this one, and it's good. It was a good one, but it does get a little technical, but there is a lot more power there.
Yeah. So what Apple has done here, they basically they did something that we were also expecting, which is taking the Focus engine from tvOS and bringing it over to iPadOS. So the Focus engine, for those not aware, was launched in 2017. It's the selection engine that lets you select UI elements on your Apple TV. When you use the touchpad, or now on the new Apple TV remote, the beautiful clicky arrow keys on the Siri remote, you can select items. You can select lists. You can select icons on your home screen. And that's called the Focus engine, right? And the Focus engine is now available on iPadOS 15. And it works in a variety of different ways, and it's got some additional features as well. So obviously this was necessary to enable system-wide keyboard navigation. So the idea is that in iPadOS 15, you will be able to select more UI elements, some by default, others developers have to manually add support for them, just by using the keyboard. Instead of having to touch the screen, you will be able to select elements with the arrow keys and with other keys on your keyboard.
Right. And despite the fact that this is based on the Focus engine, people should not think that their elements on their screen are going to wiggle around and have parallax like they do on the Apple TV. It's not like that at all, but it is how you move the focus from one element to another. It's the same underlying engine, but the UI works differently. Yeah,
and at a high level, most of the interactions appear to be based on the tab key. So you will be able to tab through different UI elements. And if you want to get down to the details here, it seems that the system is based on focus groups. So a focus group is a group of elements that sort of belong to the same category. So for example, in the Reminders app, the search box on iPad is as one focus group. The list of reminders on the right side of the screen is its own focus group. And the smart lists on the left side in the sidebar, that's another focus group. So the idea is you tab through these groups, and then you use the arrow keys to select, to focus and select different items. So for example, if you tab to the list of tasks, you can then use the arrow keys to select a particular reminder, and maybe you can open it in a new window, or you can open the detail view, you can select it, you can do whatever you want. But that's the general idea. I think one place where people will appreciate this immediately is on the home screen, because you can select with the arrow keys, you can select icons, and you can select widgets. And this is particularly nice with the new split view in iPadOS 15. So that entirely from the keyboard, let's say that you have a full screen app. So let's say you're reading MacStories in Safari in full screen. Now on your Magic Keyboard, you can do globe control left, and you will tile Safari to the left, and Safari will hide on the left side of the screen. It'll show you the home screen, and it'll let you pick something else from the home screen. At that point, you can just use the arrow keys to select different, to focus on different icons. And then you can press return, and you will create a split view with Safari on the left and whatever you clicked on the home screen on the right side of the screen. And you never had to use the trackpad, or you never had to, touch the screen with your fingers.
Right. I think it's going to take a little getting used to some of these keyboard shortcuts, but that is very powerful. And, what's interesting to me is you look at how it's architected, and it's all very intuitive and clever the way it works, because as you've described, there's these focus groups, and then there's also the way it interacts with the sidebar, which is a little different in that if you have something in the sidebar, you think about it. If you're in like the reminders app that you were using as an example, and you happen to use your pointer to click on a particular task, it highlights the list on the left that task is in. And that is this concept where the focus follows the selection. So if you select something, like it's for instance, a list in the sidebar, it'll show you the tasks associated with that. And then the tasks themselves, as you said, you navigate through using the arrow keys, and then selection itself is done either by by hitting the return key or the space bar in some instances.
Yeah. So I'm really curious to see how all of this will work in third-party apps. It seems that the keyboard navigation will be unlocked by default in sidebars. So the sidebars were launched in iPadOS 14 last year. Tabbing through and selecting with the arrow keys will work in sidebars by default, as well as text views and text fields. But then for table views or other like collection views like grids and that kind of stuff, it'll be opt-in. So developers will have to opt in keyboard navigation in those kinds of views. I'm really curious. I think this is going to be like, if you're a developer of an iPad app, this is one of the things you got to support this summer.
Yeah, and I think the reason that it's opt-in and not by default is that things like table views, for instance, are used in a lot of contexts where you don't need to select something. I think that's probably why it's opt-in, because they're used as a general way of laying out views of information in an app a lot, where it's not like something you have to actually act on. So I think that's probably why things like collection views and table views aren't using those. Plus, I think the other category that's opt-in is custom views, which also makes a lot of sense, because who knows what a custom view is? That's whatever the developer wants it to be.
All right, John, talk to me about some developer tools or something else that you've been watching things, you've been reading things. Tell me about those things.
I have. Okay, so developer tools. I won't get too deep in the weeds here, but there are some interesting things here that I mean,
you kind of are a developer, or you used to be a developer.
I kind of was. I know my way around Xcode still a little bit, although it's changed amazingly, quite a bit since you and I started working together. But TestFlight is coming for the Mac, Federico, and I can't tell you how happy I am as someone who reviews apps, because it has been for the last, especially since Mac Catalyst was introduced, it has been a real coordination effort to get betas from developers. I've had some developers who have been doing Mac development for a long time ask me why I feel like this is so important. And the reason is because you may have a Mac app that's been around for a long time, and you have your own system for releasing betas and that sort of thing. However, there are a lot of new developers coming over to the Mac from iPad and the iPhone, and a lot of them haven't done that before. And Mac Catalyst, there are a lot of technical reasons why it's very difficult for them just to zip up an app and send it to me. Essentially, what they're doing when they do that, 9 times out of 10, is they're sending me a bootleg copy that if I put on the internet, anybody on the internet could use, and they wouldn't have to pay for ever. I mean, which isn't a good way for developers to be doing business. Now, I delete those, and then I buy the app myself if I want to use it, but that's no way to kind of run a beta program. And as a result, I can't really juggle very many Mac betas at any one time compared to what I can do with iPadOS or iOS. And so I'm really looking forward to this. Now, the downside is that it's not coming until the fall, and it's coming in the fall as a beta. So I don't think I'm going to have the advantage of using this during the review season this year, but I'm hopeful that in 2022, this will really get some legs and developers will adopt it, because I think it's good for people like me, but I know that app reviewers are a very small category. However, I think it's also good for developers because it allows them to manage a larger group of beta testers who can test their apps and give them feedback. I'll tell you, Federico, probably 9 out of 10 apps I get today would benefit from this. So I think it's going to be a big positive change for the Mac App Store and for app development in general.
Yeah, but just a bummer that it's not coming this summer.
I know.
That's just sad because it would have been perfect this summer. I'm sorry, John.
I was very sad when that video came out, and I fired it up, and they said coming this fall. I was like, fall? No.
This is like seeing as a kid, seeing the presents under the Christmas tree and knowing that you gotta wait until Christmas Eve before you can open them. It's just, I'm sorry.
Yes, but they put the presents under the tree in June instead of 2 days before Christmas. That's what it's like, Federico.
Yeah.
Anyway, anyhow, I want to mention too Swift Playgrounds, because Swift Playgrounds has been around for quite a while now, and we now have an app that can develop apps on an iPad and run them on the iPad, and in fact upload them to the App Store and offer them for sale. It does the whole thing end to end. And I think what Apple's trying to do here is really just give developers who start their learning process with Swift Playgrounds the ability to do the whole chain from beginning to end, from learning the basics all the way to creating their own app, and then be able to offer it just like if a developer started learning on Xcode. And I think that's terrific. I mean, you can simulate an iPhone screen right on the iPad, or you could run it full screen as an iPad app on the device as well. And from what I understand, it doesn't look like there are any major gotchas or restrictions here. It is the UI part of developing an app on Swift Playgrounds is based on Swift UI. So to the extent there are limitations inherent to Swift UI compared to using UIKit or something like that, you've got, those will be restrictions, but they're not inherent to the fact that it's being made in Swift Playgrounds itself, which I think is terrific. So I'm looking forward to seeing what developers do with that, especially some of the younger developers who are just getting started. I mean, there are a lot of kids using this app in high school and even younger to learn how to code.
Yeah, that's great. I was a little skeptical that they were going to be like, oh yes, you can push it to the App Store, but there's this long list of caveats for doing that.
Right.
But no, so that's incredible. That's incredible. Even for I could see even more, not just kids. I mean, obviously students and kids, but also like hobbyist developers, right? Folks who are just learning their way around programming, and maybe you don't have a MacBook Pro, maybe you don't have a Mac, and you can just do it from an iPad. I mean, it's one step closer to Xcode for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to giving it a try. I haven't opened up Swift Playgrounds in quite a while, and I think I'd like to take another look at it during the beta period and see what's going on in there now and how that actually works in practice. And I guess, Federico, the third thing that I would lay out today for people is Apple is continuing its progress down the AR path, because you might have noticed in the keynote they did a demo of object capture. And this is really cool the way it works. I mean, there's a powerful set of tools here that allow developers to create apps that can capture objects in 3 dimensions. So, the kind of thing that it will enable will be things like allowing you to kind of take your iPhone and walk around an object carefully and see on screen layers and grids from that object being captured. And then it will then render those images on your Mac. And this is all very much Mac-based, but with using iPhones and iPads for the camera component, and then create a 3D object that can be used in AR. And it's being used for a bunch of different things. I think one big category that Apple sees as having a lot of potential is commerce, because there have been a lot of studies done that show that when you go to a web store and you're able to kind of rotate something in 3 dimensions, whether it's a piece of furniture or whatever it happens to be, that people are more likely to buy, and they're more comfortable buying when they've actually been able to do that and see it from all angles, and maybe even use an app to place it in 3 dimensions in their surroundings at their home. So it's I don't know that I'm going to try this or if it's going to be that relevant to us in the immediate future, but it is another piece of the puzzle that Apple's working towards with AR and related technologies.
Very nice.
All right, Federico, I think that's a good place to stop for today. I'm sure we'll have another handful of videos that we've watched between today and tomorrow and come up with a few more topics to talk to people about. I want to thank our sponsor again for this episode and all of our coverage of WWDC this year, and that is Raycast. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you tomorrow, Federico.
Ciao, John.